Value podcast. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition their business on their terms. Our mission was born from the lessons we've learned from over 100 business transactions, which fuels our desire to share our experiences and wisdom so you can succeed. Now here's your host, CEO of Mastery Partners, Tom Bronson.
Hi, this is Tom Bronson, and welcome to Maximize Business Value, a podcast for business owners who are passionate about building long-term sustainable value in their businesses. In this episode, we're going to continue this mini-series on growth strategies. This is the fourth episode in this series, and I'd like to welcome our guest, Jimmy Curtin, who is the sales coach and CEO of Next Level Sales Performance. Jimmy and I run in many of the same circles. We have over 100 mutual LinkedIn contacts, and he has his own podcast, the Networking Partner Spotlight Show. And he's also a licensed communication IQ consultant for life languages. If you're a regular listener to this podcast, you might recall that we had Gerald Parsons and Rich Russo with life languages on last year. Now, Jimmy and I are both passionate about helping small and mid-sized businesses develop a solid growth strategy because, as you know, a growing business is always worth more than a flat or declining business. And that's what we're all about on the Maximize Business Value podcast, strategies that you can use and implement to grow your business. So welcome to Maximize Business Value, Jimmy.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate the opportunity to be on here and to learn more, and also the opportunity to maybe talk a little bit about how we help people.
I can't wait. This is going to be a lot of fun based on our conversation the other day. So tell us about Next Level Sales Performance.
Thanks. Well, we formed our company a little over 4 years ago. In fact, we're in our fifth year, and we basically help companies that have reached that point in their revenue where they're kind of flat and they don't really know what they need to do next in order to increase revenue and grow their company. So we have a lot of strategies to do that, and we go out and try to help small to medium-sized businesses. We do have a few larger clients, but it's really the small to medium businesses that we seem to be able to help most.
Yeah, the small to mid-sized businesses are the ones that probably need the most help. They just don't have the resources available that large and middle market companies have. So I think that's a great spot to be in. What is your background and why did you start Next Level?
Well, my background really has been technology solutions over the past 40 years. So I was actually a vice president of sales when I was 25 years old, and that sort of sent me down this trail of helping others. And so technology in the way of I had a software company that I started and kept for about 7 years. We positioned it and sold it. I was in the telecommunications industry for many, many years. Spent 6 or 7 years working with a guy by the name of Dave Casey, also in the telecommunications industry, helped Dave grow his company. So really, it's just been a background of building world-class sales organizations and managing those organizations. And so at some point, you decide, do you want to continue to do that? And because telecommunications had changed so much and most of it had moved to the cloud, it really, to me, became more of a commodity, and I don't like commodities. So I like challenge. And so that kind of gave me the idea of doing what I've always done for companies as a VP of sales for other companies as a sales consultant.
So as you know, Dave Casey is a good friend of mine. He'll appreciate that shout out here on the podcast. So that's a wide range of different places that you've been in. What was kind of the thing that made you get out and start Next Level then?
Well, we had Dave had sold the company, and we had both spent about a year and a half, maybe 2 years there, continuing on managing the company after it was sold. And one day Dave announced he was going to retire, and that was kind of what I needed to say. You know what? I think I'm done with this too. Sometimes you just need a push. And I had actually been working on putting together next level sales performance for about 6 or 8 months before that. And so I kind of had everything arranged and lined up, and it was just just needed that little kick in the butt sometimes to to get out and start doing it.
Yeah, that's a common story, right? Somebody needs the encouragement to get going. I call it a 2x4 in the side of the head. So
That's right.
Every now and then we need one of those. So
Yeah.
your moniker on LinkedIn, of course, and the places that I've seen you, very prolific on social media. Your moniker is the sales coach. So let's talk about the difference between sales coaching and sales training.
Well, I'd love to do that. There is a big difference. A lot of people don't understand that. It's I'll kind of relate it to actual coaching in a sport. So when you're playing a sport, whether it's football, basketball, whatever, tennis, whatever it is, you have a coach, and that coach will sometimes show you a technique to use. For instance, in football, they want to show you how to make a certain block. And then what the coach does not do at that point is just walk away. And what he does is every day he reinforces the use of how to do that block, right? And so it's true. The same thing's true when you're talking about sales. What really is the difference is if sales training, you can if you came to me and said, "Hey, I'd like for you to do some training on prospecting." And if I were to get together with your sales team and I go through the PowerPoints and I tell them about prospecting, here's the best way and so forth, and then I just walk away, what'll happen is they'll leave that meeting with maybe a couple of new ideas, or more than likely, they probably just remembered something that they already knew, and they'll go back out into the field and they'll apply that for 30 days, 45 days, and then they'll slide back in their old habits. So with sales coaching, really what we do then is we reinforce those new habits until they become the actual new habits and you're doing the right things.
I like that. I like the difference between coaching. It's interesting that even of course, we all know that in, football, there's a coach, and in baseball, there's a manager, but even individual sports, and I think of selling as kind of an individual sport. It's not really a team sport, right?
Right.
But even those individual sports like golf, even the best golfers in the world get coaches.
That's right.
That'll help them and reinforce that. And so I like that. So you think of training as kind of being an event, and coaching is a lifestyle.
That's exactly true.
Got it. So I think that's really important. Too many times business owners think of training as an event. It really does need to be coaching. It's almost the way you think about culture. Culture in a business is not an event driven thing. It is a lifestyle. And so I think that it's important to reinforce those lessons that you learn. So Jimmy, why do you think that many times small to mid-sized businesses reach that critical point where sales revenues either level out, they become flat, or they even decline? Why do you think that happens?
I think the best way for me to explain that is so let's just say I'm an engineer and I invent this new great gadget, right? And now I want to take it out to market. So maybe I hire a salesperson and I take it out to market. And for the first year or 2 or 3, maybe it does really well because there's no competition until somebody does create a new one. So now here we go. We've got 2 products competing. And so what happens is the company really reaches that point where it levels out, and now they really don't know what else to do. Sometimes they throw money at it. Sometimes they throw more people at it, which is really the same as throwing money at it. But they really don't have the focus to understand, what do I need to do? So what I think the critical point is that they lose focus. They don't have a long-term plan. They don't understand how to really invest in people, maybe invest in coaching. But that's really, I think, the problem is they just lose focus because they're so caught up in inventing this, that they don't understand that it's really about marketing. It's about sales. It's about how do I move that company.
And that is so important as we started out here. And as I say frequently, a growing business is always worth more than a flat or declining business. And so as business owners think about building that long-term value in the business, I use an example. Let's say you've got two businesses, they're both $5 million in revenue, and both of them driving about the same amount to the bottom line. Let's call it a 20% EBITDA. But one of them has been flat for 5 years, and the other one has had 30% compound annual growth rate for the last 5 years. So they grew from basically a very small business to that growing business. Even though these two businesses look identical today, that growing business is going to get many times 2 or 3 times what this flat business is going to do. So growth strategies are super, super important to the value of a business. And so if you're a business owner and you're listening to this podcast and you fall into that category, you really need to think about what are some ways that we can turn this around. And even though we're making good money today, we're very profitable. How can we drive additional growth into the business? So that's why we bring on folks like Jimmy to talk about that. So, Jimmy, I understand you talk a lot about the 3 Ps of business. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so for, I guess, really my entire career, I've kind of used that as the guiding thing for me. The 3 Ps stand for people, process, and planning. So anytime you're looking at a company, or particularly the sales organization, and by the way, an assessment of your sales organization is the smartest thing you can do as a business. You need to understand, before I'm going to spend $3,000 or $4,000 per salesperson or whatever the cost is to train them, how do I know what they need to be trained on? You've got some salespeople that are great at prospecting, but not great at closing. So you need to be able to understand that. So an assessment's a big part of that. So the first thing you look at is people. Do I have the right people in the right place? I've always believed that if you're a salesperson, you're probably a salesperson because you want to be successful. You're not just there drawing a paycheck. Now, some salespeople are there just drawing a paycheck because they don't understand really well what their job is. They're afraid to do their job. And so sometimes they may look like they're lazy, but they're not. They just don't have the right focus, the right guidance. So people is what we look at first. And we want to make sure we've got the right people in the right place. Process is the next thing we look at. What is your sales process? It's remarkable to me when you ask a business owner, tell me about your sales process. They start stuttering because most of them don't really have a defined, developed sales process. And it has to be repeatable, right? That's the whole ideal of a process. And so that's the second P of the 3 Ps is the process. So we always take a strong, hard look at what's the sales process. And if you don't have one, we'll help put one together for you. Something that's repeatable that good salespeople can do. And then the final P is planning. It's remarkable to me how many companies don't really have a long-term strategic sales plan. Now, planning doesn't mean that my plan is that every day I'm going to come in, I'm going to get on the telephone, I'm going to make 100 phone calls, I'm going to try to set 2 appointments, 8 appointments a week, whatever it is, I'm going to close one, and so on and so forth. No, planning goes a lot deeper than that. What is my long-term strategic sales plan and growth plan, as you speak of a lot? What do I need to do to really, really grow?
I love the 3 Ps. You got to have the right people on the bus, and that actually speaks to how do we hire people? How are we bringing the right people into the organization? And I'm a big fan of assessments, as you mentioned. Of course, the planning, on the back end of that, so important to have a good sales growth strategic plan in place. But the processes, man, that is like the golden ticket as far as I'm concerned. So many businesses, not only in sales processes, but when I ask business owners, when we engage with our clients, one of the first things we talk about are describe your processes to me. Are they documented? Are these things that people are relentlessly doing? day in and day out so that we can duplicate the effort and do it. And I argue that many times, Jimmy, and I would love to hear your position on this, that many times I'll talk to a business owner and I'll say, hey, what are you doing in terms of sales hiring? How quickly can you get somebody up to speed? Oh man, it takes 6 months to 12 months to get somebody up to speed in our industry. And to me, that just tells me that you don't have a great sales process, because if you have a great process that's already defined that someone can step into and learn quickly and move forward, that you can cut the training time on a salesperson in half or even more if you've got a great process defined. So sales process is huge to me, and so many people neglect that because they just think, well, I'm hiring the right salespeople, they know what to do. I mean, where do you land on that in terms of process? Can that actually reduce the amount of time it takes to make somebody more productive in a business?
There's no doubt that it does. It gives them the guidance and the plan of how do I actually go to market? How do I actually close this business? One of the things that I used to do with salespeople when I ran sales teams was, it's great when we get a new order, right? But it's really great when we sit down and we actually go over all the points of how we made that sale. How do we get that sale? Did we cover our documented sales process? And where it really makes a difference is when you lose a deal. And everybody's going to lose deals. I mean, I'd love to say we get 100%, but we don't. So when you lose a deal, if you'll take that opportunity and you'll sit down with your sales process, with your salesperson, and you'll go over each step of that sales process, I promise you, you will find one or two places where you dropped the ball. You didn't do the process. And that's probably why you lost the deal.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more completely. So if you get nothing else out of this podcast, you need to define that sales process. And it's very likely that you may need some help to do that. So we're talking with Jimmy Curtin. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back in 30 seconds.
Like it or not, eventually you'll have to come to a point when it's time for your business to transition. Will you be ready? Will you be able to get the maximum value for your business? Brought to you by Mastery Partners, Mastery Class is a 12-month program designed specifically for business owners. We meet once a month as a group to work through our Transition Readiness Assessment, expand your business toolbox through leadership presentations, and have live interaction with other business owners. This program determines vulnerabilities in your business that will affect business value and your ability to transition in the future. Whether that transition is in 2 or 15 years, what you do now has long-term effects on the future value of your business. We have the know-how you need to get the results you want in your business to maximize business value. To learn more and secure your spot in the program, visit mbvmasteryclass.com. That's mbvmasteryclass, mastery with a Y, mbvmasteryclass.com.
We're back with Jimmy Curtin, the sales coach, and we're talking about growth strategy. So tell us a little bit about purpose-driven prospecting. That's a term I've heard you mention before.
Right. That's a methodology really that we came up with a couple of years ago. You know, a lot of salespeople are told, just get into the office, get on the phone, or stay at home if you're working from home, but get on the phone, make 100 calls a day. You might find 1 or 2 prospects. And so you might consider that a sales process. It's really not. But we have a methodology called purpose-driven prospecting. And what it includes is a way to utilize LinkedIn, your email, the telephone, voicemail, but it all is built around scripts. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to take a script and we're going to just read from it verbatim, right? But what it does mean is that we have a method to actually know what questions we're going to ask, what statements we're going to make. And so we have that all down in a form so that, you know, you're able to take 40 prospects from LinkedIn, right? And LinkedIn will allow you 40 in-mails in a month. So that's kind of what we based it off of. So you pick your top 40. You're going to send that top 40 an in-mail, because you're trying to make that first. You're not really trying to sell anything, right? What you're trying to sell is an appointment. I've got to get an appointment before I can sell anything. So that's really what we're driving toward. So you're sending that in-mail, and it's built around a script. It could be an email. If you don't have Sales Navigator, then you could just use an email. But once again, there's scripts for that email. And then you're going to make a phone call, and that phone call is scripted. Now, you're not going to read it off, right? You're going to have it in your head, but you're going to make sure you're covering the right things. More than likely, when you make that phone call, what's going to happen? You're going to get voicemail. I don't know what the percentage is, but I bet it's at least 80% or higher. But what do you say on that voicemail? You want to make sure that what you say on the voicemail is the same thing you said on the email or the in-mail, right? You want to cover the same points. And so you're going to leave a voicemail that is scripted also. And so then you're going to repeat the same thing. But when you repeat it with that same prospect next week or in 3 days, whatever your timing is on it, you're going to change it a little bit. And once again, you've got an entire set of scripts for those items. And so you're going to do this until the point of where you actually either get them to call you back, or you have the conversation because you catch them live, or they send you back an email, answering. It comes to a point where really over a period of about 3 weeks, you've covered those 40 prospects that you started with. And what it forces you to do is focus. And that's a big word when you're trying to sell. It forces you to focus on fewer prospects, but you're able to give them more touch points. And it is about touch points. I know Microsoft did a survey a couple of 3 years ago. And in that survey, they talked about how many times do you have to touch a prospect before you actually get an appointment or before you actually make a sale. And it's remarkable. Those numbers are just crazy. Believe it or not, 80% of all salespeople will not make the second call. They'll make that first attempt and then they're done. They move on to the next prospect, never coming back to that one. And that to me says, hey, I've got to, and I said 80%, actually it's 60%. 60% of them never actually follow up. And then when you get to the second call, it then becomes 80% of people who don't make after the second call won't try again. And the Microsoft study actually showed it takes between 8 and 12 attempts to get that prospect on the phone or to get them to respond. So by the time you get to that eighth attempt, most salespeople have already dropped out of it. So persistence is really important when it comes to prospecting. But that's a study that Microsoft probably spent millions of dollars on. And so you should take advantage of that. Understand that, hey, you got to put in the time. And you need a method to do it. If you just keep calling, the worst thing you can do is make a phone call and then when the prospect, you get their voicemail, hang up. And you'd be surprised how many salespeople say, oh, I just hang up. I don't want to leave a voicemail. No, that voicemail is an opportunity to give that information, to make that touch point to that prospect.
Yeah. I get that all the time. I have people call you. I publish my cell phone number and I get calls all the time that there's no message, right? I'll let it go. Like, my phone rang a minute ago and you would never know that because it's on silent, but I guarantee you there's no message there. And if that was somebody trying to touch me to sell me something, come on.
Yeah, that's exactly. Well, I mean, if it takes 8 to 12 touch points, I'm going to utilize that the best I can. I'm going to leave the proper information because I've got it scripted, right? As we're talking about with purpose-driven prospecting. And so that's one of the biggest things that we teach companies is how do I utilize this method of prospecting? And it's remarkable how their numbers go up when it comes to success.
I love that. I love that. And that lines right up. Now you've told me about this Microsoft study. Even back when I was in college and I studied marketing, I have a degree in marketing that's more than 30 years old, so it's useless in today's world. But they said, you had to, a prospect had to hear the message 7 times before they actually heard it. right? Before the message would sink in.
Right.
And so 8 to 12 lines right up with that. You got to hear the message over and over before it starts to sink in. And too many people give up, right? They could be on the cusp of greatness, right? But they give up before they get there. So 8 to 12, you figure out a strategy and do that,
Yep.
or get a hold of Jimmy and he'll teach you a strategy to do that. So Jimmy, how do you know when a salesperson's doing a great job?
That's really a great question. So the first answer is always, well, you look at the results, right? You look at their numbers. Are they hitting that number every month? And if they are hitting the number every month, that's great. But it's really about how do I take the B players and make them into A players, or the C player, and do I get rid of them, or do I move them into being a B player, and so forth. And so it's more than just the results. It's really about looking at the everyday process. And I've the worst thing a sales manager can do is wait till the end of a quarter to do an assessment of a salesperson and say, hey, you didn't hit your number. Sorry, we're gonna have to let you go, and we'll bring in the next person. What you really want to do is you want to monitor and look at and manage, and it's not micromanagement, but you want to manage a salesperson weekly. It's accountability. The first mentor I ever had was back when I was in my early 20s, and I remember to this day exactly what he told me. He said it's all about short-term goals and short-term accountability. And by that, it means that you don't want to have an annual goal and you don't look at it but once a year, right? My goal's $1 million, and there's my goal, and nobody holds me accountable to it until I get close to the end of the year, and it's like, oh, well, you're not going to hit your goal. What you want to do is you want to take any goal you have and break it down into weekly numbers. And you want to be able to monitor that and hold people accountable to that weekly number. If we know, for instance, that it takes 10 proposals to get one sale, well, how many calls does it take to get that appointment for that one proposal? And so you just break that down and work backwards. So anytime that I've had a salesperson that was not hitting the numbers, I would always look at their weekly activities and work it backwards. And you can always then identify, what do they need? They're not there to be criticized and hurt their feelings because they didn't hit their numbers. They're there because they want to hit their numbers. They want to make a living. They want to do beyond that. And so how do we really make sure they're doing that? You look at their weekly numbers. You hold them accountable. And then you can say, hey, here, maybe this is the problem. Maybe you're just not making quite enough cold calls, or maybe from those cold calls, you're not getting enough appointments. Let's look at that piece of your process and see if we can help improve that. So you work it back that way. And so what happens is you take B players, they become A players, or C players, they become B players. The other benefit to the company is you're not hiring and firing all the time.
And that is so expensive.
Oh, it is. And yeah, the expense is not just obviously the 3 months or 6 months that you've wasted on somebody, but it's the benefits, it's the recruiting costs, the time, particularly that's really the cost. How much time is wasted or lost by sales management, by middle management, by the individual.
I love that. Take short-term goals and then short-term accountability. It's kind of the same thing that we do in our exit planning practice. We help business owners design and execute the ultimate exit plan. But that's a long-term goal, right? It might be 4 years or 5 years or whatever it is out in the future. We have very short-term accountability things that you have to do in order to reach that goal. Same thing with sales. If you set a target for the year, how do you break it down, and what should we be doing every week, and how do we measure the results every week? Short-term goals, short-term accountability, and that builds long-term success. Okay?
That's exactly right.
I love that. Well, give us a magic bullet, Jimmy. What is your best advice for closing more business?
For me personally, I would tell someone that it's learn to focus on fewer prospects. We all worry about, and we worry about it because our sales management is always on us about our sales pipeline. Well, you don't have enough in the pipeline. Your pipeline, you got to get 100 accounts in there. in order to have an opportunity. Well, maybe that's not true. Maybe the real point is to have the right prospects in my sales pipeline. So if I can focus on fewer prospects, give them the touch points that I know that they need, I'll probably end up closing more business. In fact, I know you will. There's an interesting number that I'll share with you. So we've all heard the 80-20 rule, right? I mean, that's been around forever, maybe as long as I've been around, and that's a long time. But the new numbers will blow your mind. The new numbers are really 6% of the salespeople in this country produce 94% of the sales revenue.
Oh.
So you got to ask yourself, why is that? Well, there's 10 basic reasons, and I won't go through all 10. I don't even have them handy right at this moment. But the number one reason, the one that always sticks right here in my head, is they focus on fewer prospects. So they don't spend all their time trying to build a giant sales pipeline. They take the ones that they know are qualified, and they spend their time focusing on them, doing the touch points that they know need to be done. And that's why they close more business.
I love it. So go out and get fewer prospects and focus on those prospects, and you can close more. If you have, instead of trying to focus on having 100 prospects in the pipeline, if you had 20 of the right prospects in the pipeline,
there's the difference.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, because I've managed salespeople my whole career, and you can see when you got a bunch of stuff in there that's just beefing up numbers, right? We're never going to sell this deal, right? What are we doing? Focusing on that. I love that. Focus, get the fewer number and focus with your process on those. And I'll bet that will close more deals. So before we go though, tell us what differentiates your business from other sales consulting companies.
There are a lot of good sales consulting companies around. Most of them have, methodologies that they use. A lot of them are sales training companies. I'll tell you right up front, I'm not a sales training company. Can I do sales training? Absolutely. Whatever subject you want, I can do it. But I won't do it. In fact, I turn down business occasionally because unless you're willing to pay for and combine sales coaching with that, I have no interest in doing it, because all I'm going to be doing then is just taking your money, and because I know what the results are going to be. So the real difference between my company is that we like to do everything with an assessment to start with. I'll come in. I don't care if you have 2 salespeople. I have some clients that have no salespeople, but where the entrepreneur actually does the selling, but that's okay. They still need help. They still need coaching. So I'll come in and do an assessment of the sales organization so that I can really understand what their needs are. Is it a process problem? Is it a people problem? What do the people need? Do they need help with prospecting? Do they need to, help with closing, whatever it is. So that makes me a little bit different in that not everybody approaches it that quite that way. And then the other part is that I do fractional sales management of that team, if that's what you want me to do. And in fact, right now I'm literally the vice president of sales for 4 companies. All 4 of these companies. I won't mention them here, but because I work under NDA. But I do this. If you go to their website, you're going to find Jimmy Curtin listed as their VP of sales, because I do that on a fractional basis. I'm helping drive their business. So that's the other part of it. But really the assessment, the accountability, and the coaching piece is what makes me different.
Awesome. I'm just making a few notes here. So one last business question, Jimmy. This podcast is all about maximizing business value. And in your mind, what's the one most important thing you would recommend a business owner do to build long-term value in their business?
Invest in coaching. And here's the reason why. According to HubSpot, so this is not just coming from Jimmy Curtin, according to HubSpot, if you invest in coaching, you'll see a 16.7% return on investment for that time. So can you imagine you can increase your revenue by 16.7% by investing in coaching? I mean, that's the one thing I would say to do.
Yeah, and I think that applies across kind of all the different disciplines in a business, not only sales, but perhaps marketing, finance, entrepreneurship. All of that, I agree. In fact, most, even though we're not what you would call a business coach, it's really kind of interesting that many of my clients refer to me as their coach, right?
Right.
I'm holding them accountable. It's the same thing that you
That's
discussed
it.
when you're talking about coaching and what that means. So now, if for our longtime listeners, they always know that after I ask the last business question, I always have a bonus question, and they're always waiting. Everybody stays on until we get the answer to this question, and everyone wants to know, Jimmy, what personality trait has gotten you into the most trouble through the years?
I thought about that, and I would have to say probably persistence. Now,
Oh,
persistence can be good, or it can be interpreted sometimes as not so good. I think I had mentioned earlier that earlier in my career, I was one of the founding members of a software company, and I served as the senior VP of sales and built the company around the software that we had, and I had a customer that signed a deal with us. I think the deal was about $19 million, if I remember right. It was a huge deal for us at the time. And he called the chairman of our board after I had signed the deal with him, and he was a client. He called and he said, he said, one of the reasons that I signed this and bought this software is that I don't ever want to hear from Jimmy Curtin again. He said he is the most persistent SOB I have ever met in my life. Well, our chairman Britt asked the client, "Well, did you buy it and not want it?" He said, "Oh no, it's the greatest thing we're probably ever going to do." He said, "But I just don't want him calling me anymore." So that can work both ways, right? I mean, but I would say persistence is important, but just know when to let off the throttle a little bit.
That is a great um, uh, personality trait that every salesperson probably needs is persistence. I'll tell you when I was sitting in the CEO seat in any company that I've owned, and I've owned 100 of them, I couldn't wait for those phone calls that would tell me, "Man, your salesperson just keeps calling over and over and over again, and I wish you'd tell them to stop." And you know what I would do? I'd walk out, find that salesperson, buy them lunch that day, and I would tell them double your sales efforts to that same.
That's right.
So
You've almost got them there.
yeah, almost got them. So hey, before we go, there's a rumor going around that you and Debbie Mrazek, who was our guest on last week's show, grew up in the same town. Is that true?
That is true. It's funny. We're both Rider Raiders. We both went to the same high school, and I didn't even know Debbie was in the business until about 5 years ago. And I was looking through LinkedIn on something, and I saw it, and I thought, wait a minute, I know her. But that's very true. We both grew up in Wichita Falls, which is, I think I tell people, Wichita Falls is kind of that starting point, but it's that point between West Texas and the rest of Texas.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it really is. It really
but
is.
yes, that is true.
That is hilarious. I will tell you because I asked Debbie the same question. We didn't put it on the podcast, but she said, "Oh yeah, Jimmy was one of the cool kids. I didn't hang out with that crowd. He was in the cool crowd." And so there you go. There you have it. So how can our viewers and listeners get in touch with you, Jimmy?
Well, thanks. First of all, we have our website. It's www.nextlevelsalesperformance.com. And my phone number is 1-800-310-0134. Or you can call me on my cell phone at any time at 214-564-0410. And as you had mentioned earlier, we do a podcast. I do the 2-minute sales drill podcast. And then I do a show similar to this, although not as well done as yours, I would say. It's called Network Partner Spotlight Show. And you'll see that on LinkedIn. You'll see it on our YouTube channel also.
Excellent. The 2-minute sales drill. I love
Yep.
that. I've seen that one as well. It's a great, very impactful, short program. You should go look at that as well. So thank you for being our guest today, Jimmy.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
It has been a ton of fun. So you can find Jimmy Curtin at nextlevelsalesperformance.com, or you can find him on LinkedIn. And of course, if you reach out to me, I will be happy to make a warm introduction to my good friend, Jimmy Curtin. This is the Maximize Business Value podcast, where we give practical advice to business owners on how to build long-term sustainable value in your business. Be sure to tune in each week and follow us or like us wherever you found this podcast. That helps us to go out and find other folks that might need our help. Be sure to comment. We love your comments and we always respond to them. So until next time, I'm Tom Bronson, reminding you to develop a great growth strategy. It will do more for your business value than you realize, but do that while you maximize business value.
Thank you for tuning into the Maximize Business Value podcast with Tom Bronson. This podcast is brought to you by Mastery Partners, where our mission is to equip business owners to maximize business value so they can transition on their terms. Learn more on how to build long-term sustainable business value and get free value-building tools by visiting our website, www.masterypartners.com. That's master with a Y, masterypartners.com. Check it out.
That was perfect. I wouldn't make any changes on that.